podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How We're the Podcast. And the nerves are jangling as our first leg is almost upon us. So to try and get rid of those nerves, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but we thought we'd get together and give some final thoughts following the manager's press conference, as well as a few little news bits that have come up over the last few days. And especially that press conference, because he might have given us one or two clues in terms of team selection. And there's been a few comments from players as well in the last few days. So luckily for me, I have a couple of people to help me do this. And first of all, it's our man down under. It's Martin Wanless. Hello, Martin.
Hello, mate. I'm not sure that we need much motivation at the minute after listening to the chat that Gav had with a Coventry fan. Listen to a Coventry podcast. I tell you what, if I was Regis, I wouldn't even bother doing the team talk on Friday. I would just let them listen to those podcasts and make their own mind up, because I tell you what, if anybody was like, I'm sure nerves will hit me pretty soon, but if anybody's still feeling the slightest bit apathetic about the playoffs or the slightest bit about the form going into them and all that sort of stuff, put your earbuds in on the school run, listen to what Coventry fans are kind of thinking and expecting on Friday, because if you need any motivation whatsoever, it's right there in abundance.
Yeah, it was interesting. Even Rob Gurney, even though he was completely, everything he said made perfect sense. But there was a couple of little slips where he was like, "Oh, we're not taking anything for granted." I was like, well,
I know
you're hinting that you are.
I must be living in a parallel universe, but I don't know. I might regret seeing all of this come Wednesday, might we? But we will see.
Well. That's it. Well, yeah, we'll get into it, because also to join me is the man who's been on more different podcasts this week than I've had cups of tea. It is, of course, Jonny Hawley. Hello, Jonny.
Morning, lads. How are you doing? It's nice to be back home, back in the mothership.
Interesting. So just let people know where they can find you, your lovely dulcet tones, and also your face, because I've seen a few videos going around, your clips.
Maybe where they can't find Jonny would be a short thing.
Yeah. So no Newcastle podcast, and that's about it, really.
Really, the overlap he's not on, isn't it?
The year is young. No, I've been on Bedford Sportsman Untitled. They had the playoff special this week, which was good fun. There was a representative from each club, and all too smug Leeds fan hosting it. So go and catch that one on all the podcast platforms. I've been on a couple of Coventry podcasts.
All right, it's not an advert. I'm just asking you to tell people what you've.
Well, I spoke to two Coventry podcasts. One of them, that Cov pod, just had a half-hour chat, but the other one, I spoke to the lad who was on with Gav, I think, from All Things Sky Blue, and they were still pretty bullish and pretty confident when I spoke to them as well. So it would be quite nice to put a little dent in that confidence come 10 o'clock Friday night, but I'm sure we'll get onto that.
Yeah. Just for my curiosity, Jonny, are those little clips, are those rehearsed, or is it like off the cuff, or do they give you some lines?
So they obviously tell us what the questions are going to be first, but they don't give us any lines. That's all off the top of the dome. That.
Oh, look at that. That's all just me. That's my performance. That's brilliant. I love all that. Well, I didn't want you to give any secrets away. By the way, we would have cut it, if you'd kind of, the magic circle and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, let's get into Sunderland, right, gents? Look, let's start with some news and our news roundup. So let's before we get into the press conference, of course, and Friday night. I think I'm just avoiding talking about it now. It is, of course, awards season, so let's get into that. That was Sunday in terms of the club's awards. Trai Hume, let's start with that. Player of the season and Players Player of the season. I'll start with you, Martin. Did that make perfect sense that he collected both of those?
Yes and no. And I think the no bit is because I don't actually think there's been anyone who's had like an absolutely exceptional season compared to anybody else. And I think that's symptomatic of a good team to a large extent. I think, even if you go back a few months, we were we were kind of saying Trai Hume's not in the best of form. He's not bombing on as much as he should do. And I think we talked, I can't remember when it was. Was it maybe the Millwall game after the international break? Because he'd come back from international duty a little bit injured, hadn't he? Or he'd come back early with a hip problem. And I think after the Millwall game that he played, the first game back, we was, it's great to see Trai Hume back in form. He looks like the player he was at the start of the season. So it's not as if Trai Hume's had this marvellously consistent season all the way along, but I think it's just very telling of, overall the approach very much has been as a team unit rather than individuals. I think the season's been based on that. So look, I think Trai Hume's an excellent player. I think it's always interesting when the voting is done on these sort of awards, isn't it? Because they're obviously done in advance, and it can be the point in the year when somebody's had a good little run or a good spell at the forefront of people's minds when they're voting. But look, I think Trai Hume's a very worthy candidate. I think you could probably pick 3 or 4 who would equally have deserved it. I think if you'd done the voting at the end of Feb, Isidore would have been right up there for player of the season. So, it's very much a moment in time in some respects. But no, I think I've got no problem with him winning both of them. I think, he's one of a number who could have done.
Yeah. I mean, Jonny, I agree with Martin, actually. I think Trai Hume's had quite a few dips this season, and actually, arguably, I don't think this has really been his best season at the club, even though he has been good, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some nuance here. I'm not saying this, it's not just good or crap, but I think he has had a better season in the past for Sunderland. But what would have been the other candidates for you?
Yeah, look, I agree with Martin totally in the sense that it's tough to find one person in particular who stands out, really. I think what a lot of them have been victims of as well is that different players have had good runs of form, but all at like really separate times. So you remember, Wilson Isidore's run of form, culminating with that Middlesbrough game away from home. You remember Dan Neil kicked into gear and then he had performances like Swansea away. You remember the run Jobe was on, particularly near the start of the season. Even going as far back as, August, September time, Mundle when he first got into the team after Clark got sold. So there's a lot of players who've put together small runs where you'd think, if you could have just done that for another month or two, you'd be a shoo-in for Player of the Year. So I think for me, you could have arguably picked almost any of those players who I've just mentioned. Maybe not Mundle because of lack of games, but yeah, I totally agree that there was no standout candidate because... Yeah, partly it's because we're a good team, so everybody's quite good. But yeah, I just don't think anybody's took the season by the scruff of the neck. Everyone's kind of fallen short in one way or another. So yeah, for me, look, I don't begrudge it for Hume because I do think he's had a really good season and he's as deserving as any of the others would be. But yeah, it was a tricky one, to be honest. I think it's been tough for the league in general as well. I think it's been there's been a real kind of lack of standout quality individuals, barring a real handful at maybe Leeds and Burnley. So yeah, it's been all much of a muchness for me in terms of Players of the Year and those kind of awards.
Mm. I'm glad you made a statement in there saying because we're a good team, and I'm glad you said that because I think I'd almost forgot because of what's gone on in recent weeks. But Martin, Jonny mentioned Joe Bellingham. He got Young Player of the Season. I mean, everyone keeps going on about this young squad. Was there an argument that could have said he was actually, potentially Player of the Year, and someone like Mayenda or something like that would then be a candidate for Young Player of the Year?
It's whether they exclude them from winning a senior award if they still fall into the young category, isn't it? I don't really know how it works, but again, I think the Young Player of the Year is the same. You could probably pick, the vast majority of the squad, really, couldn't you? Obviously, you've got, but in reality, like Jobe, Rig, Mayenda, 3 players there who, you could make a really strong case for each of them, couldn't you? For Young Player of the Year. So I think, again, Jobe's very similar. He's had great spells of form. That run-in that he had up till he got sent off at QPR, he was superb. Came back, we were all saying, he needs a little bit of a rest, might do him good. He didn't quite hit that height that he had before that when he came back in the team. And I think he's improved an awful lot this season. I think, you're saying about Hume, it probably isn't even his best season at the club. I think Jobe is significantly further ahead than he was with us last season. So, again, I think, he probably is the worthy winner of that one. But I think Mayenda, I think if the voting had been done on the morning after the Bristol City away game, my ender could easily have scooped that one, couldn't he?
Well, that nice segue. Thank you very much, Martin. It's almost like you can see what I've got in front of me, because I'll move the goal of the season award to Jonny, because it went to Eliza Mayenda with that goal against Bristol City. And I at first my initial reaction was, "Oof, hang on, was there not maybe one or two that you could put up there with it?" I mean, I remember Dan Neil away at the Swansea. That sticks out for me. Is there any others that stick out for you that could have challenged it?
Yeah, despite it being a pretty naff game all the way through, Romain Mundle's late goal against Preston at the Stadium of Light, where he just, so precisely bent it, right into that far top corner. And I think I remember, it was midweek, so I was just watching it on telly. I couldn't, get up and down from Leeds on a random Tuesday. Well, I will next Tuesday, but that's to one side. But that game, I remember the angle on telly being perfectly behind it, the way that it bent in and seeing the replay. I thought at the time, that's goal of the season, sewn up right there. So to then see Mayenda pull something like that out the had against Bristol City and set the cat amongst the pigeons, that I don't think that didn't deserve to win goal of the season, because it was a brilliant solo effort. But I do think maybe recency bias is playing a little bit of a part there, because you can even go further back and, we've had goals like Jobe against Derby at home, I think it was, where he just, rifled one into the top corner from outside the box. And there's been a handful. Even Mundle away at Luton, there's some decent ones. But yeah, for me, Mundle at home to Preston would be the one where I'd be thinking ooh, are you sure that wasn't maybe a little bit better? But hey, fair play to Mayenda. He deserves it.
Yeah, and I can see the strained look on Martin as you're trying to look through the memory banks through all the goals. Is there any others stick out for you?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, we've talked about the player of the season, young player of the season, as not being a standout candidate. And again, that's kind of symptomatic of the team playing really well. And I'm kind of a little bit surprised that we didn't get a team goal more than a spectacular individual goal. Both Mayenda's goal and Mundle's goal were brilliant technique and, for very different reasons and very different stages of games and circumstances. But I'm just trying to rack my brains about a team goal that we've scored. Obviously we haven't scored one like the Clark goal at Reading. That was a brilliant team goal. But I'm sure that even was Mayenda's second goal at home against Sheff Wed, where we had a really nice move and Jack Clark went down the left and put it in, and it was just a tap in. But every element was really good. Passing was great. Movement was great. Mayenda's movement in the box was great. And again, if you're putting it, how are these ones decided? The public supporters votes? I presume there must be. I can't remember seeing the vote.
I think so, because obviously the Trai Hume got player of the season as well, didn't he? So I assume all of the others were fan votes.
Yeah. Yeah, but look, I think those two goals that we've talked about, the Mayenda goal and the Mundle goal, really stand out in the mind, don't you? I think if you ask anybody to name the two or three best goals this season, those two are going to figure for every single person whose memory's working relatively well. So, no complaints. I think both very different goals, but yeah, I would probably agree that the recency bias is probably evident in Mayenda's one there. I would have gone for Mundle myself, but there you go.
I think the timing had a lot to do with it. And actually, I've just realised, I forgot to talk to Simeon Golan, but I'm always been wary of those EFL awards ever since they ignored that goal against Reading, and it wasn't even nominated for goal of the season. So that kind of put me off those awards. Just to finish off the awards, Luke O'Neill was awarded Community Player of the Season. I mean, we should maybe just give him like Community Player of the Century or something, and just say, look, let's not have that. Let's retire that. And you can have that. So I don't think we need to really talk about that, because that was a shoo-in. Well, I suppose, let's touch on it a little bit, because you could argue he's been one of the most consistent players of the season as well. And one comment I was going to make, Jonny, was talking about Player of the Year. Trai Hume got it at right back, but two players, maybe should mention in that, Chris Mepham and Luke O'Neill, who actually, because of maybe the second half of the season, have been two of the most consistent players in the side.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little symptom of just defenders. I mean, I know Trai Hume's a defender, but certainly centre-backs, they're not very flash, are they? They don't tend to win these kind of awards. I think, even like the elite level, the kind of Ballon d'Or in these kind of awards, you get, I think Fabio Cannavaro won it, 20 years ago, and that's the only one I could remember. People just don't really like to give these trophies to centre halves, so I think that's probably counted against them a fair bit. I think O'Nien, look, I absolutely love him to bits. We may as well rename that award the Luke O'Nien Community Player of the Season.
Well, it will once he leaves.
I was going to say in 3 years' time or 4 years' time, it will be, won't it?
Yeah, exactly. But I think what's maybe held him back a little bit in the eyes of the fans and the people who decide these things this season is he has made a few fairly high-profile mistakes at times in games, which have either cost us goals or almost cost us goals. Now, don't get us wrong. I think he's been, he's had far more good performances than bad, and he's done far more brilliant things than he has made mistakes. But, football is a moment's sport, isn't it? The reason we have goal of the season awards and stuff like that is because those moments stick in your memory. And I think it's the same for players. If you've got a few real standout positive moments, that can hide a lot of things. If you're a really solid, steady, consistent player, but you have just a few moments going the other way, sometimes that can, colour the perception as well. And I think, just for a word on Mepham as well, I think he's been brilliant this season, but I think he maybe suffers a little from having, he took a little while to get into the team at the start of the season. He's had a few games where he's dropped in and out. So, I wonder if that maybe just counts against him a little bit in the end.
Yep. Well, let's finish off the awards. For Sunderland women, Katie Kitchen was named Player of the Season. Libby McGuinness was picked up both Young Player of the Season and Goal of the Season for a goal against Durham. Under 21s, captain Harrison Jones was named Player of the Season, and his younger brother, Jaden Jones, was named Player of the Season for the under 18s. Next in the news roundup, we are going to go to Scotland. Nectar Triantis has been nominated for Scottish Footballer Writers Player of the Year. And I think we've all seen the clips this season. He's been absolutely flying at Hibs. And on the back of his nomination for Football Writers Player of the Year, his agent has been in the news making comments that he wants first team football next season, which you don't blame him, especially after the year he's had. But apparently he's a wanted man across Europe. And, I've seen all the clips from him this season, charging from midfield, picking up the ball, and it's all good in hindsight, Martin. But could he have played the role maybe Samed was brought in to play this season?
I think it really depends on where the club see him and want him to be, because I think the club have very high hopes for him, being a Sunderland player of the future. And I think, you don't bring somebody from the other side of the world over at 19, 20 and expect them to hit the ground running and go straight in the first team, especially not with the aspirations that we have. So I think really when you look at the makeup of our midfield and how we've played and managed minutes, Chris Rigg was always going to get the minutes he's got this season, obviously barring injury, but the plan was obviously for Rigg to get those minutes. The plan was obviously for Bellingham to get those minutes, and Dan Neil's the captain. So there was never going to be a scenario really where somebody like Triantis was going to be playing week in, week out. Obviously they brought Samed in with the intention of playing a hell of a lot more than he has done. But the Samed role this season that the team's needed has been a few moments off the bench that haven't been particularly impressive, have they? So I think if Triantis had been at Sunderland this season, yes, he would have played first team football, but he probably wouldn't have got into the team to the extent that he needs to get into it. So I think this has been the perfect move for him this season. And look, I'm not saying at all that we couldn't have done with him in the squad, because I think there's been moments this season where we really could have done with him in the squad. And I remember me and Gav were doing a podcast before the Portsmouth game very early on in the season, and I was actually advocating for Triantis to start in that game, and he went to Hibs the next day. So I was pretty far off the mark there, but I did. But the point being with that, I did think he could offer us something at the start of the season. I thought he could be in and around the side. So look, I think that's been great for him to have that experience. Obviously, it's the second season on loan at Hibs. The interesting thing for me is where he's actually been playing in midfield, because you kind of expect him a centre-half by trade, converted centre-half, if you're looking at it at present, to be a really sort of deep-lying, sitting midfielder, but he's not. As you say, Chris, he's kind of been up and down, and he's been described as playing in the 8, described as being playing in the 10 role on some occasions. So I think the club are watching this very closely, because there's so many question marks over our first-choice midfielders at present. And I really would not be surprised to see in the summer Dan Neil moving off to pastures new, because his contract situation's been bubbling under for 12 plus months, hasn't it? And that's not been resolved. So I actually think Triantis will come back to us, and he will be given a chance in the first team if we are in the Championship. I think if we're in the Premier League, it's a whole different story and conversation. And I think if we are up there, you'll probably get another loan spell to a European club or to a higher level in the Scottish Premier League, because obviously, there's going to be an extent to how much he can learn there that he doesn't already know. But I think I'm actually quite excited about him, and obviously there's a massive part of me wants to see him come back and play, but in my mind that means that we're not going to go up. So there's the overriding emotion there is I hope we never see him and we flog him, but we'll. I think he's got a hell of a lot of potential.
Yeah. I mean, Jonny, Martin didn't say it as such, maybe in not so many words, but I suppose the question mark is that, Scottish Premier League may be considered, let's call a spade, a bit of a farmers' league. I mean, Martin was about to say it and stopped himself, I think. But
that's quite diplomatic, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, is that the question mark? I mean, does he look impressive in that league? But is there still a question mark, or is that just saying, yeah, I mean, look, in the Championship, he would be a cracking player. And, if we do think, if we are that, have got those worries about your Jobes and your Riggs and even, Dan Neil as well, lots of speculation about him leaving the club, especially if we don't go up. I mean, is that almost a perfect player to just say, right, well, he'll slot straight in?
Certainly a concern about the level, I think, to put it in diplomatic terms again. But having said that, though, you can say that about players from a lot of leagues. How many times have we seen players come over from, say, Holland, and it's like, just rolling the dice. If you get an odd number, they're going to turn out class. If you get an even number, they're going to be rubbish. For every Luis Suarez, you've got a Josie Altidore. So sublime to the ridiculous there. In a sense, you can almost disregard the level, not completely, but it's more about the player and the style of play that they are playing in that team. And I think Triantis playing in the roles that he is, being so physically dominant, being able to really get about the pitch and impose himself on games, I think that's a much more important indicator of where he'd be when he comes back. Because obviously the Championship and English football in general tends to be quite physically demanding and intense. So if Triantis was a diminutive, skilled little winger who'd gone up there and was torturing people because he's just too good for them, I'd think, are you going to be able to do it when you come back? But he's gone up there as a more combative type of player, and I think then being able to hold your own maybe carries a little bit more weight in terms of, is he going to be anywhere near the level when he comes back? And I also totally agree, Martin, as well, with what you said. If we go up, I don't think he's got a sniff of actually starting games next season. I think we'd need to stay down in this league for him to come back and have a chance of getting on the team sheet from day one. But I really rate Triantis as a player, to be fair. I think it's funny as well, when Triantis and Sealt both signed, I think most people were maybe a bit more excited about Sealt than Triantis, particularly once we started seeing them in Sunderland shirts. But, now here we are a couple of years on, kind of saying, I hope Triantis comes back and we see him play. Sealt's just been a bit of an afterthought after his injuries. So, it's funny how it turns around.
Yeah, I always remember the soccer AM, Rangers Celtic, and jocks. Probably wouldn't be able to get away with that now, but never mind. Right, well, let's get on to the press conference, because it kicked off straight away. Nick Barnes straight in there with the injury news, and it's been a delay around Mundle, and it looks like it's too soon. Martin, probably not surprising, but I I've mentioned a couple of times recently, and we've talked about it a lot in the past. I mean, I don't know whether it's on that scale or not, but we remember, the fuss around Colin Pascoe trying to get him back fit in 1990, and there always seems to be an injury saga with somebody saying, "Oh, they're on the cusp of coming back, but they're not going to make it." But I mean, do we just face facts here that even if he does get back and is available, he's not going to be match fit, is he?
No, look, I think the reality with Mundle, especially given that this was his second hamstring injury in pretty close succession, he was out for a hell of a long time with his first one. I think that 6-week prognosis turned into 16 or 20 weeks, isn't it, by the time he actually made his comeback? So, look, I think they're going to be balancing wanting to get him back on the field with caution about his injury as well, because he is such a good player and such an important player for us that they're going to want to make sure his recovery from injury is prioritised over anything else. So, I think they're going to be a little bit cautious with him. I must admit, even listening to Le Bris talk about it, I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the bench on Friday. I think, he's not going to say, yeah, Romain Mundle's great, he's going to start on Friday. He's going to keep his cards close to his chest to some degree, isn't he? But I think we're more likely to see him either off the bench in the second leg or hopefully at Wembley in the final. So I don't think, and look, even if he was fit, even if he's been training for the last 10 days or 2 weeks, he's like, yeah, he's fit to come in. He's going to need games to get back up to match sharpness anyway. And I think, we've seen with Tommy Watson, you always pick the bones out of his performances and look at reasons why and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that he wasn't match sharp and hadn't played for 3-4 months when he came back was a factor. And how big a factor that was is kind of up to your own imagination, really. But it was a factor. And, we've seen tons of it, haven't we? We've seen players come back. Lefay needed to be nursed back to fitness. So I think, anybody hoping for any more than a little cameo off the bench, if we need a spark from Mundle in the playoffs, is unfortunately kidding themselves.
Yeah. And on the other aspect of the injury news, Jonny, was Ajay Lise, probably too soon for him as well. But on the Mundle thing, with the manager's comments over recent weeks, we've needed almost like a morale boost, and he's almost kind of pinned his hopes on Mundle coming back as being that boost. And it's really strange that he's been saying, yeah, he'll be ready for the playoffs. And then, that then something happens, and then you have to almost kind of announce a bit of a blow and say, yeah, he's had a delay. He's not quite ready. I mean, do you think he almost regrets trying to build him up and saying he's going to be ready for it?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because, as you say, you want to try and keep the spirits up. And as, the final weeks of the season progressed, there were fewer and fewer and fewer reasons for people's spirits to be up as, the losses were piling up. And, yes, we were guaranteed in the playoffs, but I think, the place wasn't getting any happier by the game. So, yeah, maybe kind of dangling that little carrot in front of the supporters a little bit of, don't worry, you'll have Romain back. He'll be back for the playoffs, man, don't worry. Yeah, it does. It's helpful in the moment, but now, like you say, having to almost soft announce a bit of a walk down of that position is maybe not the positive impetus you want going into the first leg. So it's not ideal from that standpoint. But having said that, I also, like Martin said, Le Bris is not exactly going to come out and start, getting a whiteboard out and drawing his starting 11 and his bench and who's going to be coming on at what times in the press conferences. He'd be stupid to do that. So it's not out the realms of possibility that Mundle still does make the squad for Friday night. But having said that, it would be a real surprise. And even then, even if he's fit for the second leg, it's only 4 days later. So how much fitter can he get in 4 days? He's not going to be starting that game realistically, is he? So I think maybe just a little bit of a reset of expectations on Mundle's needed, in the sense that, we were all hoping he'd be backfiring for the semis. I think that's clearly not going to happen now. So we've got to hope that hopefully he can get some minutes under his belt over the 2 legs of the semis in whatever form that comes. So he's maybe got some competitive action going into a potential playoff final if we were to get there. And then you'd maybe hope that he can step it up a little bit at that stage where, it would be more important if we were to make it to Wembley. It's a bigger game. It just is. But yeah, it's not ideal, is it? It's not what you want to hear.
No. And I'm just going to assume that I'm not going to see him, and anything else is a bonus, basically. That's the way I'm looking at it with that. And if you have already listened this week to our podcast with Nick Barnes and Rob Gurney, you will notice that Nick mentioned the issue of goal scoring, which has been an issue for Sunderland, and he quizzed the manager on it in the press conference. The response was that it's been a difficult situation towards the end of the season, and then he compared our situation with Paris Saint-Germain, which of course Sunderland are always compared to. But the fact that they started losing once the kind of league title was done and dusted, and then they had to focus on the Champions League. But Martin, I mean, it kind of goes back and maybe a bit longer than that, and maybe the whole of the season. When you look at how many times we've beaten a side by more than one goal this season, I think it's maybe 3 times. I mean, is it more of a worry than he lets on?
I'm not sure if he's worried about it, because even when you look back, I remember us talking about Le Bris when he was appointed, and we were talking about his all of the stats behind Lorient and all that sort of stuff. And actually, his whole plan and his whole philosophy at Lorient was letting the other team have possession, counter-attacking them, and being really clinical with the chances you get. So I think really the chance creation bit isn't I don't think he'd be bothered about that. It's taking the chances, being clinical with the chances that we do get. And, you can go back through this run of games that we've had. And I know we haven't had 5 defeats in a row. I know we haven't had many real clear-cut chances sitters, but we have had chances in the games. And I think, you go back to earlier in the season, we probably were taking 1 or 2 of those chances just as a matter of course. And obviously that changes the whole dynamic of the game. Even if you think back to that Coventry at home game, there's 2 goal of the season contenders there, wasn't it? But they were completely out of the blue goals, brilliant goals. Isidore's goal and Serkin's goal. They weren't chances that we created and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's that element to it where, his whole approach is not based on creating a boatload of chances and just taking, however many we get. It's being really clinical with the chances that we do create. I think massively important to this, obviously, Isidore's form hasn't been great. Mayenda hasn't been, neither of them been the most clinical, haven't it? But Mayenda's obviously I think he's improved an awful lot with his sort of clinical finishing over the past 4 months since that sort of Christmas spell. But he's not the most clinical of strikers anyway. So we're going to have to create more chances over the next 2, hopefully 3 games. Massively important to that is Lefebvre and where he plays. And I cannot fathom the fact that we could be starting him on the left on Friday. And I think we will. And I think, you just fast forward, can't you, 3 or 4 years' time when Enzo Lefebvre is winning the bloody best player in Europe after winning the Champions League for Real Madrid. And he was on loan in Sunderland. They never played him in his proper position. That's going to be a thing. I'm absolutely guaranteed. I'm certain of it. So I am so desperate that we actually just go, right, Lefebvre needs to play centrally and almost figure the rest of the midfield and forward line out around that, because I think this is so critical. And I am hoping beyond hope that all of this playing him on the left since his return from injury has been an absolute elaborate ruse to lull whoever we play in the playoffs into a complete false sense of security. We'll probably go 3 at the back, 2 up front, and Lefebvre in behind the 2 strikers.
Well, you are our resident starting 11 guru on this, doing it for every game. So, but we'll get into the starting 11 before we finish up. But Jonny, he went on to talk about kind of the emotion and keeping players in check in terms of saying that this is still a football game and that we need balance in how we approach the game. He referenced specifically the Sheffield United away game, the Leeds and Burnley away games. Does that give us the biggest clue in terms of how he wants us to set up for this first leg?
I think the words confirm what I think should have been obvious for people for a while now, which is that Le Bris, I think, relishes the bigger games, and I think he enjoys setting the team up in such a way to try and not grind results out, but, to have those tough battles. And I think there's no coincidence that this season, our best results and performances have tended to come against some of the better sides. I've maintained all season that we should have taken 6 points off Burnley and 6 points off Sheffield United. It wasn't them overrunning us that lost us points in games against those. It was, missing penalties from us or red cards or what have you. And even the games against Leeds, I've spoken to plenty of Leeds fans, obviously living in Leeds, I can't get away from them. And to a man, they all say, look, you were the best team that we've played over 2 games this season. So now you can argue about the negatives of that being that we've struggled against, haven't won a game against Plymouth all season, which isn't great. But I think it means that Le Bris, I think he's got always half an eye on whatever the next bigger game coming up is, and I think he looks at preparing the team specifically for those games. And so I think the fact that he's harkened back to those types of games that we've had this season yeah, I think that's basically for me. That's just almost a bit of window dressing on what you could have seen pretty clearly, over the past few months if you were paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fully expecting. I think I mentioned in one of the recent pods, I'm expecting, like a performance like Norwich or West Brom away as being the blueprint to look at in terms of setting up. But he was also questioned about nerves, and it was a bit strange, Martin, that he actually then responded by saying that considering where we came from last season, we're just happy to be taking part in the playoffs, which I thought was a slightly odd comment. And he said would have 100% taken this last summer, which I think nobody can argue against. And this is just another chapter of the season. I mean, do those type of confidence kind of give people that confidence boost or not?
They don't do much for me, I have to say. I've preferred Alex Neil's approach to the playoff semi-finals rather than that. But look, he's right in what he says to a large extent, isn't he? But that is kind of irrelevant approaching this game. So, look, I think he's probably trying to downplay it. He's probably he will be very well aware of the impact that 3-0 defeat at Coventry, I nearly said Highfield Road, that 3-0 defeat at Coventry had on the players and supporters, because, it was a pretty big blow to morale. And we're probably going to face exactly the same on Friday, aren't we? We're going to face, the crowd's going to be up, they're going to come at us. Again, listening to the Coventry people talk about the game, I think the overriding thing is they feel as if they need to take a lead at the Stadium of Light. They need to come back for the second leg with something to hold on to. So I think we'll see them come out, and I think Le Bris talked about in terms of, for the first 20, 25 minutes, the crowd's going to be really lively and loud, and we're going to have to manage the game. And, we've done this on some occasions, but we tried to do it at Coventry, and we just kept getting pushed back, and then we were swamped, weren't we? So it's, hopefully it's just a little bit of a mind game tactic to really take the sting out of that question. As I say, I've got no problem with factually what he said. I just don't necessarily think it's the right time or the right response to the question he was asked.
Yeah. And then, Jonny, I mean, he did kind of go back onto the kind of slightly being defiant track when we're talking to those questions about restoring the intensity and also the history about the two teams as well. He mentioned that he thinks that, these players want to play in big games and they'll be ready. And he also mentioned the whole Coventry thing that, well, okay, he says, I know about the history, I know all about it, but he wants to write a new story and make our own history. I mean, do you think as well that, based on that, and Martin's just touched on it there, Coventry's away form hasn't been great. They haven't won away from home since the 1st of March. Do you think that's something we can also play on, in the fact that they're going to be thinking in their minds, we really need a result in this first leg to take back to the Stadium of Light?
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, it reminds me of the way he spoke about Middlesbrough earlier this season. Obviously we've had such a poor record there over the years, and he was saying mostly the same things, wasn't he? He was talking about how that was then, this is now, we're a different team, we're different players. Obviously that gives it holds slightly less water when we haven't actually beaten Coventry this season as well, so you can't talk too much about the past. But I think you're right to point out that their away form's poor, and I'm sure he'll have been drilling that into our players, over this week. And the message might have been, without saying directly, listen, lads, if you bring them back level, or even at worst a goal down to the Stadium of Light, we've got every chance of doing this. Obviously we want to go there and win on Friday night. Of course we do. All of us want to win the game. But he will know, I think, and the players will be aware exactly of, Coventry's record, how much better they are at home versus away from home, and all of that stuff. So I'm sure that will be kind of forefront of their minds, hoping to bring them back to the Stadium of Light, because, obviously we've been on such a bad run. If we can get some sort of positive result in the first leg, it's a totally different complexion on the atmosphere and the mood of the fans for that return leg at the Stadium of Light. So I'm sure he'll be, drilling that one home to the players this week to make sure that you're in the game come the second leg, because then I think it's advantage Sunderland.
Yeah. I mean, Martin, just in terms of that situation, Jonny's just touched on it again, and we all know about it. But it was again, his comment in the press conference. He said that this has been a positive, in this situation, that it's got us ready. It said it's given us the chance to get to manage injuries and not rush them back. And then he said it's allowed us to put the jigsaw pieces into place. But is that all ruled out by the fact that we lost 5 in a row? I mean, you might as well talk about, positive that we kind of get these players back and we're nursing them back and we're being able to do that. But I mean, it just seems like a complete contrast with losing those 5 games.
It really depends how you're looking at it, doesn't it? And look, we want to look at this positively. So we are going to rule out any impact of momentum or the impact of positive results and all that sort of stuff. And you look at it purely from when we confirmed our playoff place, the goal was to go into that first leg with as fit a squad as possible. Ramp them up in terms of where they're at, even if they're not suffering from injuries, ramping them up in terms of their match fitness and match sharpness. And we've managed to do that. We've avoided suspensions. Obviously, Trai Hume missed 1 game, but we're not going in with any suspensions. We're not going in with any injuries. We're not going into this first leg. Oh, shit, who can play centre half? Right, who's the smallest person? Let's stick you there. Right, so we've from that perspective, we've managed the whole thing perfectly. The thing that overrides or spans over everything, I wouldn't say overrides everything, but it umbrellas everything, is the form and momentum. And we've talked about it at length, haven't we, in terms of what that impact looks like. And look, I don't think Le Bris would go, this has gone brilliantly, I've been fine with the results, all that sort of stuff. I think he would have expected, I think the players would have expected that in that run of 5 games, we might have lost 1 or 2, but we might have won 1 or 2 and drawn a couple. And you're kind of going in with that patchy form rather than straight out 5 defeats and no goals or whatever it was. So you've got to manage that and balance that and try to counteract that in some way. And look, even on, I think saying even on Sunday against QPR, the players were evidently not flying into things and all that sort of stuff. So you can kind of see that bit there having an impact on how the players are approaching. So look, let's hope it has been a miraculous master plan.
Yeah, and just on this, Jonny is just getting a call from Gary Neville, so he's off to record the next episode of Overlap. But always a pleasure, mate. And we'll talk again, I'm sure, after this first leg, mate.
Yeah, no, cheers for having us on again, lads. Pleasure's all mine as always.
Quick prediction before you head off.
I'm going to say 1-1 first leg. That's
Right.
what I'm going to say. Yeah, maybe slightly hope over expectation.
Good stuff. I'll take that, mate. But take care and we'll speak after. Cheers. And Martin, the other thing was he was mentioned about the hype. He said he was asked is this just the same as any away game and is that how we approach it? And he was very quick to throw back and say, no, this is different. This is unique. Now I look that as a good thing. I quite like that.
And it'll be interesting to know what he's referring to in that, whether that's because it's a playoff game, because that by its very nature is completely different to a regular league game or cup game away from home, isn't it? You've got the Coventry element thrown into that, where we've got such a bad record away at Coventry over the past 40 years. And you've obviously got what happened away at Coventry earlier in the season. But I think, so you've got that bit where you go, right, this is a different scenario. So as a team, we've got to prepare differently. You would be foolish as a player or as a manager to walk into that going, right, it's a regular game. This is all good. This would be nice. So you've got to be mentally attuned and avoid what happened at Coventry happening again, because we know that was by far our worst performance of the season. Like the streets, until the last few little games, you could probably throw Oxford into there, couldn't you? But
it's all relative, isn't it?
It is all relative. When we were actually playing for something, that was our worst performance. And it still is by a distance. I think it's our worst performance of the season. Yeah. So you've got that bit into it. And I think we've really got to come back to the fact that let's look at it factually. Like Coventry ended up with the same amount of points as we did when we got into the playoffs. And when we got into the playoffs on 69 points, I think we were the first side, or only one of the sides had done that in about 20 odd years. That points total would not have been good enough to get in the playoffs in any other season in around 20 years. So they're the first team. I don't think any team got into the playoffs on that under 70 points last season. So they're the first team since us to do that. And Bristol City have obviously come in on even fewer points than Coventry have. You look at their home record is good. It's similar to ours, but it's similar to ours after we've lost 2 or 3 at home in that tail end of the season, which kind of gives you a little bit of a false skew on our home form. And away from home, the no great shake. So you look at it factually and statistically on paper, and you can go, I don't understand this disparity of confidence that we're seeing, or this overconfidence more at the point. Because I think as Sunderland fans generally, we've kind of shaken off this run, and we're now looking forward to the playoffs and the challenge that lies ahead of us. Although I think there's natural apprehension there with Coventry, especially with the first leg. But you're kind of going into this, it's a huge game, right? So he's completely right. It's not a regular run-of-the-mill game, isn't it? It's completely different, but it's different for a number of reasons. You've got 3 very different dynamics that are combining to make it a pretty unique challenge, really, I think. You can equate it to the Middlesbrough away game that Jonny talked about before, where you go into a hostile atmosphere where it's going to be pretty intense for certainly the first period of the game. You've got a terrible record down there, so you've got that to rectify as well. So it's similar to that, but then you've got the whole playoff thing chucked in as well, which again adds a whole different dynamic to it. So it's a pretty unique game, I think.
Yeah. And I liked, in terms of the atmosphere, I liked what you reminded me of the other day on a pod when you said Alex Neil's reaction to being asked about Hillsborough. And he said, what, are we worried about a few people saying boo?
A few boos. That is the mentality that you've got to have, isn't it? Like, that is, I genuinely hope that we've taken, and look, when we've gone to big away games this season, Coventry being the exception, gone to Burnley, managed that brilliantly, gone to Borough, managed that brilliantly, gone to Leeds, managed that brilliantly, despite the results going against us. I thought performance and how we were structured and all that sort of stuff was great. Sheffield United managed it brilliantly. So, we've gone away from home to the top teams in the league and managed away games well. Coventry was the exception, and hopefully that, I'm again clinging on to the hope that we've learned so much from that game that we completely avoid a repeat of it.
Yeah. And I'm exactly the same. I'm hanging my hat on some of those away performances. But when you look at our away performances in general, one of the unfortunate traits we've got in a lot of them is starting slowly. And it was interesting that specifically the manager talked about managing the first 20 minutes, because we talked about Coventry coming out, they need a result. They're worried about their away form. They want to bring something back on Tuesday night. They want at least a 1-goal lead. I mean, 2-goal lead, happy days. I mean, you've got to worry from our point of view, us kind of scoring 2 and getting back into it. But, you expect him to almost go for that. Jonny predicted 1-1, but that 0-0, 1-1, low scoring game. I mean, is that what it's all about? Riding out that first 20 minutes and just getting ourselves into the game? Because it seems like that's the plan.
I'd be really concerned if we tried to do it, because I think it's such a high risk strategy, because as we saw when we played them a couple of months ago, we tried to do that and we just couldn't cope with them and we got swamped. If we try to do that and it doesn't go right, it could be tie over before half time, because, again, we've talked earlier, we don't have that many goals in the team. So we do need to keep it tight in terms of the scoreline. But the question then is, what's the best approach to do that? Now, when we played, I know, again, I keep referring to this 5 minutes of Bristol City, which is another thing I'm really clinging on to. But I thought we started that as we want to start the playoff semi. Away from home, big atmosphere, they wanted to come out and win. We pressed, we kept possession, we really dominated the game. And we actually took the sting out of the game before Trai Hume got sent off. Then that, obviously that changes everything again, doesn't it? But I'm really hopeful that we're kind of thinking, look, last time we went there, we tried to defend, and look, that's worked on a few occasions, hasn't it? It's worked at Burnley and a couple of other places too. Leeds being a great example, although we know how that turned out. I'd be really concerned if we tried to do that against Coventry. If we just want to sit back and defend, I think being structured, being sensible, keeping the ball is absolutely what we need to do. I think we need to press. We need to do more at the other end though, because at Coventry when we tried it, we couldn't keep hold. When we got the ball, we couldn't keep hold of it, and I think that's been a little bit of a problem over the weeks since then as well. Our ball retention's not been really great, and we haven't got on the ball to kind of take the sting out of them. So taking the sting out of them doesn't come from stopping them scoring and trying to grind them down a little bit. It comes from making them run because we've got the ball, and I think we need to get those two bits nicely in sync. Which is why I'm hoping Lefebvre plays centrally as well, because I think he can get on the ball. He can do the dirty work as well off the ball, but he can get on the ball and keep possession probably better than most other players in our side can. So I think that's going to be crucial. And I think getting Lefebvre on the ball centrally for the first 20, 30 minutes, especially, could be key to us actually coming out of these two legs with a positive outcome.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking through this. It's crazy that we're clinging on to 5 minutes of games or a performance way back when and going, I'm hanging my hat on that. It's going to be.
You know what? Not many other people will have spotted it, will it? No, none of the Coventry scouts aren't going to go, they're going to base what they do on 5 minutes against Bristol City. But I reckon we might.
They'll listen to Sunderland fans for 5 minutes and they'll know exactly what to look for if Lampard wants to look at the best form of Sunderland. Right, well, again, I mentioned I've got the starting 11 guru, of course, and yourself, Martin, wrote a report. So let's go into that and and then we'll finish with predictions and take it from there. But I want to look at the starting 11 quickly from 2 points of view, what you think the manager will do and what you would do, because I think already you've established that there might be two different things. Let's go, obviously, Patterson in goal. Look, if we start off with the back four of Hume, O'Nien, Mepham and Serkin, is there an argument for Ballard?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think, the only compelling argument to bring Ballard back, and he might do this because of Serkin. So you're looking at going to Coventry away. Dennis Serkin's just come back from injury. Dennis Serkin is going to be massively important for the home game. So is there a conversation about putting O'Nien out at the left back, putting Ballard in with Mepham at centre halves, and Hume at right back for the first leg, just to give us a bit more defensive solidity?
Or flip
Hume
O'Nien as well.
You could flip Hume and O'Nien if you wanted to, couldn't you? So I actually think there's a chance he could do that, because I think you've got both those elements, and I think we're going to get bombarded by Coventry, and having Ballard, who's probably our best aerial defender in the team, could be important. I think Coventry did fling a few crosses into the box when we played them. So I started answering that question thinking he probably doesn't, but the more I think about it, there's actually probably a strong argument to make for that. And you've got the twofold thing, obviously looking at what the opposition is going to do, but managing Serkin for the second leg. Because I think a fully fit Dennis Serkin, when you play the home tie, is a player who can make a difference. And yes, he started on Sunday against QPR, he came off the bench against Oxford, but he's still working his way up to match fitness, and 2 massive games in 4 or 5 days are going to be a big ask.
So are you saying that's what the manager will go with Serkin, but you wouldn't?
I reckon I would, Talking about it now, I reckon I could well think that. The more I think about it as well, the more I talk about it, it's kind of thinking out loud, isn't it? But the more I think, like, Le Bris could do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
I hadn't actually thought about it, but the more you talk about it, I mean, the thing is, it's one of these that you don't know behind the scenes. That Serkin might be flying and he might be really sharp and he might be completely fit. He might be still feeling something. Now, if he feels something at all in that injury and he's still carrying a knock, I think you're absolutely right. And basically, you want him to come out all guns blazing to push on in that second leg. But I can't see the manager doing anything else but Hume, O'Nien, Mepham and Serkin. I'd be staggered if because you might have a similar problem with Ballard, but the other aspect to that, and again, I'm doing the same as you and talking myself, but the aspect of Simpson, right? That actually, if you would actually be tempted to put Ballard up against Wright.
Yeah, and like Ballard was the Leeds, was it the game after Leeds, whole game that he got injured, or was it the Leeds game? Because he played in the Leeds game, didn't he? Because he put the ball over to Isidore to score.
Yeah.
And again, that was a similar sort of game. So I reckon Ballard's going to start.
Well, see, it's going to be more interesting because I thought the defence would be easy. So we're going to get on to the more difficult one in midfield. Let's just start off with and you talked about the failure, but let's start off with Roberts on the right, Jobe, Neil in those deeper positions, Rig in the more advanced one in the centre, and Lafayette on the left. Because there has been talk of people saying, is Samed built for a game like this? There's been people saying, do we start with Mayenda on the left and Isidore up front? Because we can maybe include Isidore, that kind of position up top as well, because it might lead on to who plays on the left. And then you've got the dilemma of Lafayette on the left or in the middle. So again, what do you think the manager's going to do, and what would you do?
I don't see a way in the world that Samed starts either of these two games. I think he might come off the bench if we need to manage a certain period of play or, pending injury. But I don't see any scenario where he starts in midfield for us. Jobe, it's interesting because Jobe kind of played a bit more of a deep role, didn't he, in the last couple of games? And I think we'll probably see Jobe drop a bit deeper and Neil being the more forward. I think that was kind of done with these games in mind. But I think they'll be the sort of central two.
Yeah, they'll sit, won't they? I think they'll just sit in front of the back goal.
Yeah, and one of them will push when we can, but the two of them will work as a pair. Roberts is the interesting one because traditionally he hasn't played two games in a week. So when we went away to Leeds, he was on the bench. When we went away at Luton, Roberts was on the bench. Both midweek games, both high-pressure away games. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Rig put out on the right-hand side for the away leg. So I think you'll want Roberts fresh for the second leg, or Roberts as an option off the bench. Which, I've said before, and people might kind of think I'm on another planet, but I think when you look at the player profile of Rig and Roberts, obviously Roberts has got probably more natural skill, if you like, or natural ball dribbling ability. But in terms of the profile of them, they're both actually similar in terms of what he wants there, in terms of being left foot, being able to move the ball, playing those triangles, being able to play quick passes and do some work off the ball. I think Rig gives you a bit more defensive solidity there. And, depending on what happens behind them, whether it is Hume or is 09, we might need that defensively there. And also Roberts is a great option to bring off the bench against tiring legs if we needed to push for something. If Rig goes out there, then you've got who plays in the sort of more advanced midfield role, haven't you? Which is I'm again, I said it earlier, I'm hoping beyond hope that Lafayette is playing centrally. I don't think he will. If I was going to, but I'm undecided. I'm really like 60-40 on this. It's not like I'm 99% certain he's not going to. I'm really 60-40 on it because he's such a good player. The manager knows him. The manager's worked with him loads before. That's his position. These are games that we have to win, and I just think we've kind of got to go for it. But then again, Le Bris was talking about when Roberts and Lafayette playing wide, we need Isidore centrally to stretch the game, which I thought was a bit strange because we kind of haven't played those three like that successfully that often. So again, that's obviously a training thing rather than evidenced in game time. So look, I would play in kind of trying to balance what we're going to do over two legs rather than one. I would play Neil and Jobe centrally in midfield, Rig on the right, Lafayette in the centre as the third more attacking one, Mayenda on the left, and Isidore through the middle. I'm not sure that's what he'll do. But that's what I would do. What would you do before we try to second guess Regis?
Well, again, I'm trying not to be influenced too much with a bad run, because look, if it's almost like if you go Roberts on the right, Jobe, Nail, Lafayette, Rig, it's almost like saying, well, it's almost trying to repeat the same thing again and get a different result. That we've had over the last few months, or the last couple of months, or whatever it's been. Now, I'd like us, and I've said this a few times, probably since going back to not far into the new year. But if you go back to this beginning of the season, when we always had an outlet on the left, and it was either Mayenda or Mundle, and that pace, we hit teams so well on the break earlier in the season. I'd like us to get back to that, but where every time we got the ball forward, we looked dangerous. And I think that only works really with Mayenda on the left. That we've got Isidore up front, who's got a little bit of pace, but Mayenda from breaking from deep, rather than being that point person where they're easy to mark from a centre half's point of view. Because, you see Isidore, and part of Isidore's kind of problems, or kind of, what he's had to deal with, is that being that lone striker, you're easy to mark unless we really catch you on the break quickly. And we haven't had the pace to do it. So I think it's really important, because especially with Mundle not being fit, and I love Mayenda up front, and I think it's a shame actually that I'd prefer him on the left, but I just think we'll be better off like that. And then that brings Lefay into the middle to receive the ball and play people in behind.
No, I agree. Like, the other option on the left who could do that's Watson. We haven't kind of considered him really for a role out there. But, if you're looking at a player who can carry the ball with pace when we're counter-attacking, like, I wouldn't start him, but there's a bit of an argument to say you could.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I think that would work better, bizarrely, and it kind of shouldn't really be saying this in some senses, but that would work in the away leg, I think, more than the home leg. Just because he'll probably be feeling a bit more pressure in the home leg, but away from home, that might work. Where obviously the kind of travelling fans are just naturally kind of behind you from the off. But yeah, Watson. I mean, I remember Watson at Bramall Lane. He looked absolutely fantastic playing that role. And I think he might have picked up a knock in the end. I can't remember, but he looked fantastic in that game. And if he puts in a performance like that, then great. Because the worry is with Mayenda and Isidore, you pick up an injury to Warden, and then that's it. You've got no other option to play up top.
Yeah, I think the time for thinking like that's gone. Like we've got to go for it, haven't we? Yeah. But like in terms of how we can't be managing that in case a fully fit player gets in. I can completely get behind somebody who hasn't played much recently being protected, but Mayenda and Isidore, I think, the other thing with, if both of them start and Mayenda's on the left, I actually really like Mayenda on the right, because he can cut in and he kind of gives that nice inverted balance, if you like. But the other thing with having those two on the pitch at the start is it gives you the option of changing the formation quite significantly. You can push the two of them up front. You can push Mayenda in to play just off Isidore and put Lefay back a little bit wider if you want to. So it gives us options to switch things around.
You've pushed a few times for Isidore to move out to that left-hand side. Do you think now it's too late, the fact that we're in the playoffs, to do something that we've never done before in a match?
Well, we've never done it in the match apart from his debut at Portsmouth, where I think he played 15 minutes from the left, and that was kind of it, wasn't it? And look, I think it's staggering, given the problems that we've had on the left-hand side of attack, that we haven't played somebody who was brought in with a reputation of being a left-sided attacker, that we haven't tried him out there or given him a bit of a run. It could be another master plan to lull people into a false sense of security, and we haven't shown our hand at all. I doubt that's the case. Look, it's if it was a case that he'd never played out there and we're going, I reckon he could do a job out there, completely different, isn't it? But he's got experience playing out there. Le Bris is very well aware of him being that sort of player. It could just be a complete joker to chuck into the mix at some point, couldn't it? But again, I think we would have seen something resembling it at some point. And it's the same as the five at the back, because you look at I think it was in the international break, wasn't it? Before we came and played against Millwall, I was really advocating we give 5 at the back a go, just so we had an option, just so we go, okay, let's if we need to switch it, let's switch it. And I jotted the team down here, right, which will not be the lineup. Well, it might be the lineup, but it won't be the positions. But Patterson in goal, a back 3 of Mepham, Ballard, and 09, Hume and Sirkin as wing backs, Neil and Jobe and Lefay as a midfield 3, Isidore might end up front. Now, to me on paper, that looks a pretty nice side. You're taking away the problem of the left wing, which, in our system that we've got, that left wing spot has been a problem, certainly since Watson got injured against Bristol City, wasn't it? But really since Mundle got injured against whoever that was against. Oh, that was against Coventry, wasn't it?
No.
I think it was. So I think doing that would take away completely. Now we've got Sirkin back, take away completely that issue of the left hand side of the pitch. But it's way too late to be trying that in a competitive game. So I don't think there's a hope in hell of us seeing that. But it would, you kind of look in this paper and go, well, it could be a goal. But I think we've got more chance of seeing Isidore out there than seeing 5 at the back. But I think it's only a very slim chance, to be honest.
Yeah. So we've gone through all the options, which I think is a good thing. I think the fact that we have got options, I mean, that's the point. But come on then, what's he going to go with? Is he going to go with just Roberts, Jobe, Neil, Lefay, Rig?
The team I've got down, I think he'll play Patterson in goal, Trai Hume, 09, Mepham and Sirkin at the back, Daniel, Jobe in the centre midfield, Roberts, Chris Rigg, Enzo Lefay on the left, and Isidore through the middle.
Oh, you think he's going to go with Isidore, not Mayenda?
Based purely on his comments about Isidore being needed to stretch the opposition. And if you look back to when we played Coventry, Mayenda started up front, and he's talking about when we're in games like that, when we've got Roberts and Lefay coming in, they need the ball to really stretch, and Mayenda will come deeper than Isidore. Isidore stretches the game more, and to get them on the break, Isidore's pace is going to be more crucial than how Mayenda plays. He said Mayenda can do that to an extent as well, but Isidore's essentially better at Mayenda than doing that role. So I think, reading that, I think if Roberts and Enzo Lefay start wide, which I do think will happen, I think will be fairly predictable in terms of how we line up. And I think within that predictability, the one dilemma is Isidore or Mayenda, and based on his comments about what we need when Roberts and Lefay, and he mentioned those two specifically, what we need when those two play out wide, he literally said, we need Isidore. So to me, I don't need to be Hercule Poirot to kind of think he's probably going to be playing Isidore through the middle. So that's what I think he'll go with.
Yeah,
I really like our team with 09 and fullback, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, if you're reading the Start 11 piece that Martin's put out on the day of the game, as you listen to this pod,
it'll probably be completely different. Harrison Jones in the 10.
Why not?
Simon Moore in goal.
Whoever's fit, basically. Yeah. But well, look, let's finish off. Let's go into prediction time. What are you thinking?
Look, in our predictions that we do in the site, I've gone for 1-1. I think I'd be quite happy coming back to the Stadium of Light with the tie level. I think as long as we've got something to play for in the second leg, I'll be quite content with it. We don't want them coming up and having 2 goals or more to defend, because I think we've proven time and time again this season we really find it difficult to break teams down, and obviously depending on the scoreline, that will, even though they haven't been great away from home this season, if it's half time in the game, isn't it? So if they've got a lead to defend or they've got a lead to recoup, that's going to completely change how they play. So really, home form, away form in the second leg isn't as important or isn't as influential as it would be for a standalone league game. I just hope we go down there and smash them. Like I just really hope we go there and quieten them down. We win 3-0 and we just put them back in the box and we come back up to the Stadium of Light. But in reality, I think it'll be a really tight game. And I think it's crucial how we manage our first 15, 20 minutes. Crucial. That will determine how the whole two ties end up.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. And I see. Well, I'm going to go for a goalless draw. I was going to go for a 1-0 win to Coventry, but my worry is if Coventry get a first goal, my worry is that the floodgates are going to open a little bit, that they're going to get tail between their legs, and that we're not going to be able to cope with it.
And look, it's going to be interesting in terms of how that goes, right? Because I think they're going to come out and try to win the tie in the first 30 minutes. I think they're going to try to use the energy from the crowd and the noise from the crowd to try to overwhelm us and repeat what they did against us in March. The longer it goes on, if we can keep them down to 0-0 or keep them down to 0, the dynamics of the game change completely because they will not want to go. They don't need to win it in the first leg, but the need to keep a clean sheet or keep us from getting a lead will override their need to take a lead. I think they would rather go in without us obviously having anything. So I think what I was saying, I think they would rather go in with a draw than kind of risk getting a winner whilst potentially letting us get a winner ourselves. So I think, as you kind of might expect in these sort of games, and towards the second half of the second half, I think if it's level, it'll become quite tight. It might actually play into our hands because we'll be trying to tempt them to come and try to get a goal. And that obviously tries to give us the opportunity to counter-attack them. But I don't think they'll be desperate to if they haven't got in front in the first half, I don't think they'll be desperate to get in front. I think they might be more concerned with keeping it level because they'll be wary of our counter-attack, which makes it a completely different game from the league game. So, we can, again, going back to what I said, like that opening spell is so important, which again, and we've got to retain the ball better. It's not just about us getting 11 players behind the ball, batting down the hatches and hoping we escape by hook or by crook from the first half an hour with our goal intact. We've got to actually take the game. And if we can control that first half an hour, we're putting ourselves in such a good position to then take it. So I hope we do take the sting out of the game, but not in the way that we tried to in some away games. I think we need to take the sting out of the game by actually having the ball. I can't even remember what your question was. But there you go.
I'm just lost in nerves now. But yeah, I think, I was going to say, I don't know whether this 8th or 9th playoffs that we've probably experienced. I've experienced, I remember them all apart from the Gillingham one. So how's your nerves?
I'm getting more nervous, I have to say. But it's, you know what? It's good nerves because, again, listening to the Coventry fans and how confident they are. I tell you what, if it was us, right, and this shows the difference between mentalities of different sets of supporters and just different sets of people. If we were playing the playoffs against a team that we hadn't lost to at home for 40 years, we'd be going, oh shit, we're going to get beat, aren't we?
Yep.
It's bound to happen. This is when the run comes to an end, when it matters the most. Like we would be absolutely convinced that was going to happen. So, I'm kind of taking that, going, you know what, this is, when we end this run, this run against Coventry will come to an end, right? There was absolute certainty. And what better time to do it than these next two games, right? There's no better time to do it. And I'm going, right, that's such a good opportunity. Like the players are all fit. The players have, had kicks up the arse from bad results. They've all had words internally, all that sort of stuff. Coventry was celebrating after the game on Sunday because they'd achieved something. So, and they think getting to Wembley is just, they've got to tick a box and they're down in London. So we just need to use that as motivation. And I'm not as much nervous as I'm just really up for this now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, that's the idiot can buy effect that I like to call it in terms of Sunderland, because I was there at Fulbert Street that day.
But we've had so many, haven't we? We've had so many over the years where, it's
you just know.
I tell you, we will beat Coventry again at some point. That will happen. That's not a radical thing to say. Like, so we will win against Coventry, both home and away, soon. So let's hope it's very soon.
That's it. There's nothing more we can do now than bite our nails and watch on. But thanks again, Martin. Always a pleasure, mate. And we'll speak on the other side.
We will indeed.
And thanks again, everyone, for listening. I hope your nerves are holding out better than ours. You can probably tell we've kind of tailed off in this podcast and just lost in the different scenarios that might happen. There's loads to listen back to on How the podcast if you want a distraction or two. Loads of interviews, loads of build up to the game. But of course, we'll be back with all the reaction along with all of our usual features throughout the playoffs. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.